Yeah, and I mean, Matt, I know that you've got really serious problems in Alice Springs that we need to discuss and make people aware of, but certainly it does not help when the ABC has their own crews, I understand it, in Alice Springs that are familiar with the community. But my understanding about what happened with particularly the radio report in question was that they had an Indigenous Affairs reporter come from out of town who showed up late, who got a bunch of comments from people who were activists who said that the whole town was full of white supremacists, and then didn't provide any evidence in that report of any sort of white supremacy. How does that affect the town in its ability to really get the good policy outcomes that it needs and the good attention that it needs from the rest of the nation to help you guys solve your problems?
Yeah, I mean, we do have our ABC in Alice Springs has actually covered this quite sensitively for a long time. They live here, they understand what we're going through. They're fed up just as much as the general punter. So, the comments on the Tuesday talkback were, pretty savage towards ABC, but I'll just say that the local ABC have done a fine job in covering this over the last few years. But again, it's that point. It's taken away from the actual challenges that we face about promoting Alice Springs and the challenges we're going through, and yet we're talking about the ABC. I've got 3,500 people in the community come together in a town hall. That's over 10% of our population on a Monday night have come together who just want to see change. And of course, when you put 3,500 people in a room, you're never going to have 100% of people who agree. But overwhelmingly, the majority of that crowd come together because they want to see some positive outcomes for Alice Springs. We're seeing people leaving in droves at the moment, and that's upsetting me as the mayor, but I can't blame them because they no longer feel safe here.
Well, yeah, you can't blame them because the crime stats are appalling. And violent crime, and to listen to that report and for them to have three activist types who describe the meeting as just white people concerned about their safety. But the truth is that it's Indigenous women and children who are also probably predominantly the victims of the violence we are seeing and the lawlessness and the mayhem. So the misrepresentation is just so stark, but also the lack of regard for those vulnerable women and children whose lives have been turned upside down.
Yeah, and the irony, I suppose, out of this whole situation is the people within the town hall meeting that were protesting were saying, what about the kids? And I think that's the point. What about the kids? We're all on the same page here. We've got the alcohol problem and the antisocial behaviour problem. We are spending a lot of time talking about the alcohol. But look, as you said, the women and children are suffering the most here. And so when we talk about putting stronger futures back in place, which I'm a very loud advocate for, it's because of the protection of women and children. And I don't really understand the East Coast and people down south saying it's a race-based policy. I'm not sure that the women who are suffering domestic violence and the children who are suffering abuse would necessarily agree with the people who are promoting that when they've never stepped foot in Alice Springs, to be fair.
So, Matt, what are the solutions that you see that you would like to see happen? Because you talk about, as far as I can tell, it's education, it's discipline, which is lacking. John Howard at one point wanted to bring in the army to stop the sexual abuse of kids within remote communities, not Alice. But on the East Coast, or the rest of Australia, looks at the problems and says there must be genuine, practical, pragmatic solutions rather than all this symbolic twaddle.
Yeah, well, how long have we got to go through the solutions? But firstly, I think that they need to implement stronger futures straight away. That was part of the intervention, and then it was a Labor policy in 2012. That's what people do forget. They just say, big bad John Howard. This is a Jenny Macklin policy from 2012 that was implemented. We had it for 15 years and it rolled over overnight, and we weren't ready as a community. The ducks weren't in a row. The alcohol management plans weren't in place. We need to go and introduce alcohol management plans straight away. And we also need more resources such as police and health workers in the hospital. When I say people are leaving in droves, they are also police and health. And that's the really challenging piece of this as well, is those two services are completely under-resourced. So if something does continue to go wrong, then, who knows what will happen. So they're the two immediate things. And I mean, the bigger picture is about investing in remote communities, putting police out on remote communities, the education piece, providing an economy for people in a remote community so they want to live there. At the moment, why would you want to live 500 kilometres away from Alice Springs? There's not much to do there. We get this push-pull factor for people coming into Alice Springs, and we don't have the infrastructure or the resources here to cater for 60,000 people surrounding Alice Springs. So, in the short term...
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
No, carry on.
I was just going to say, in the short term, it really is the stronger futures and resources on the ground to address both problems, the alcohol, but the antisocial behaviour. Because whilst they might be interlinked, at some point, removing alcohol is not going to fix everything.
Jan, just quickly, and also love to hear what Stronger Futures actually is, but James,
if you just tell us a little bit about that, but at the same time, how do you feel about the way the PM has come in? They had a big summit meeting. They've taken a week to get the report. The report they're still sitting on. We don't know where that's going to be when, as you say, the needed things to be done are so obvious. Do you think that there's just a go slow in this whole process that's causing you more trouble?
Look, I haven't seen the report or the recommendations. I imagine that there's a few uncomfortable truths in there, and that's probably why they're sitting on the report. I will say that we need to have the uncomfortable conversation, and, it is about keeping service providers accountable, the organisations that are on government funding, keeping them accountable, because we can't have 200 kids on the street with 35 organisations in Alice Springs providing services from government money that clearly they're not doing their job. So that's all part of this uncomfortable conversation that needs to be had. Now, Stronger Futures, in Alice Springs, we've got 17 town camps. They are living areas within Alice Springs, effectively a small remote community within the jurisdiction of Alice Springs. We don't carry out municipal services. That's done through another organisation, but they're restricted alcohol areas. If you have a licence that lives in those town camps, you can't purchase alcohol. So, we've got police on our bottle shops. We've got the BDR, which is the Banned Drinkers Register, so you've got to scan your licence. So we've got pretty strict alcohol rules here, and now we can't buy takeaway alcohol Monday and Tuesday. I think that the Stronger Futures, clearly, it works. We're seeing domestic violence double, the assaults double as soon as that was lifted in July last year.
Matt, you've mentioned all the groups that are working there on the ground, and yet you do have these kids running wild, deplorable rates of neglect and abuse. What is going wrong? Because you can't say resources haven't been devoted to this issue, billions going to this every year, and yet the outcomes are so appalling. I mean, do we need to rethink the entire way we're going about this issue?
Yep, absolutely we do. Now, if we were going to start again and we said, okay, let's just have a blank canvas here and start again, there is no way that as a community we would fund 35 service providers in a town of 27,000 people. And, I understand the world of politics and it's an unpopular opinion, but people need to be held accountable. If it was any other industry, they would need to show their KPIs to the government that are giving them money. And so that is all part of this conversation. The territory families, children and families elsewhere, for me, they're the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. If you're a child and you get in contact with territory families, there are 35 service providers that have let you down. Mm-hmm. And that's the accountability piece that we're not talking about. Is we might not get enough money. I don't know the books, but what I'm saying is the money that we do get, we're not spending it very well above the cliff with those providers. And so if we started again, there is no way you'd be giving 35 service providers funding, because clearly that's not working.